The south of China is a veritable maze of rivers and mists. The landscape engravings of the Guangxi province. Over hundreds of kilometers, the indentations of the limestone reliefs impose countless meanders upon the rivers. These lands of dream and legend are the cradle of an ancient art that jealously guards its mystery. Paintings in red pigments decorate the rock face, often dozens of meters above the ground. Who were these painters of the impossible? How did they manage to create such works? What was their meaning? For what religion or god were they painted? For more than 2,000 years, on the site of Huashan, we've admired their startling work from a 180-meter-high cliff. Some claim, in fact, that Huashan means the mountain with paintings. Huashan, the greatest monument in the rock art world. From his farm in the Vendée, archaeologist Jean-Louis Lequelec dreams of Huashan's mysteries. CNRS researcher, leading rock art specialist, and tireless traveler, Jean-Louis has, however, never been to Huashan. He is, however, eager to go, and not just for the beauty of these sites, but because the art in this region of the world may help him answer a question that to him is vital. Why does rock art exist?
What is this idea of drawing? On a rock face, on a mountain, on a cliff? People, animals, signs? It's a funny idea, in fact. Why? And for whom? Huashan may hold the beginnings of an answer, at least in mythological terms. And it was at a time and a place when writing existed. China is also interesting in that it's one of the places in the world where writing was invented eons ago. So we have very ancient texts. So suddenly, there may be a connection here. It could at least shed light on the context. And that's very rare too. Nowhere else in the world, virtually, do we have this kind of thing for such ancient periods.
Mythologies, legends, and even texts dating back almost 3,000 years. No other rock art site can boast so many clues that might enable us to pierce its mysteries. Yet the art of Huashan is still little studied by Western researchers. And it's that, too, that sparked Jean-Louis' curiosity, enough to inspire some real exploration work. That's why he and his English friend, archaeologist Paul Bond, resolved to journey to Huashan and together explore the enigmas of its art. Paul and Jean-Louis kept their word. They're making their dream trip to Huashan come true. To reach Guangxi, to sail down the Mingjiang, to find the rocky pyramid of Huashan placed on the river. What might you feel on such a journey? Will you find the land of legend described in the texts, will you finally find answers to the questions that have tormented you for years. They now must regain terra firma and approach the reality of the site, first of all in the company of Zhu Qiuping, the archaeologist in charge of conservation on the site, and Grace, their Chinese interpreter. They begin by observing the painted rock face from the opposite bank.
So how many paintings do we have here?
他问这里有多少画，就多少个。
In Huashan, we have found 1,951 paintings on this site.
And so what is the size, what is the width and the height of the panel here?
规模大概是什么样？
From top to bottom, the painted face is 45 meters high. Its total width is 221 meters. We can't see very well from where we are, but in fact, there are lots of little paintings. The smallest of them measures only 20 centimeters. Most are between 80 centimeters and 1.6 meters. Lots of paintings are bigger than we are. Above all, there's this one we can see there, just above the treetops. The size of the characters is 3.6 meters. I often wonder how they could have painted people so big. It must be very difficult.
These impressive dimensions make the Great Cliff of Huashan an exceptional work, unique in the world.
One of the major aspects, of course, of Huashan is its absolute monumentality. This is the biggest rock art panel we know of anywhere in the world, and clearly this was their intention, to make something really breathtaking, huge, impressive.
The picture frame is quite simply the mountain, the whole mountain. One face of the mountain is the canvas. All of a sudden, it takes on a different scale. I could never have imagined what it's like to be here.
It's in a very beautiful landscape with all these astonishing limestone mountains, which you only really get in Southeast Asia. The river itself is very beautiful. You have buffalo on the two banks. You have people fishing, people farming. And then Huashan itself, of course, is very special because it's like a great triangular space, which clearly was very special to the people who decorated it. And to suddenly come upon that, and then as you get closer to start to see these figures slowly emerging as you get closer and closer is really very, very striking.
It's all about the physical impression, because we're tiny compared to this vast rock face. You have to lean backwards to see things. It really does tower above us. It's very, very high. So these characters looking down on you are very impressive.
Although the Huashan Mountain is the most important of this ancient arts monuments, map in hand, Paul and Jean-Louis discover that in fact there are more than 80 secondary sites spread out along the region's two rivers, the Mingjiang and the Zuojiang. On the cliffs at the base of these rivers, there are dozens of examples. But a dozen more sites have also been discovered away from the rivers on mountains in the jungle. Originally, the rainforest reigned over these isolated lands. Patiently, a rural civilization has loosened the forest's grip by carving out an agricultural landscape made of fields of rice and sugarcane, still one of the region's main resources. Here, retracing the course of the river, main thoroughfare between these limestone massifs, is like going back in time. Here you are light years away from the frenzied hustle and bustle of the country's major cities, or even in Ningning, the nearest town. Visitors to Huashan must first cross the perpetual chaos of the factories and building sites to find a world that is a world away, all silence and slowness. If they followed the river's rhythm, it would be impossible for Paul and Jean-Louis to reach all the sites and see everything. On the advice of Zhu Qiuping, they decide to target two sites that are typical of the region, the sites of Dushan and Gaoshan. To get there, they take a boat upstream of Huashan, one of these elegant flat-bottom boats. Compared to Huashan, Dushan has few decorated panels, but turns out to be even more dizzying.
There's also something just above the grey rock, there. Some red panels.
Little trees on this kind of plateau here. They could have gone there to paint, but even climbing up here.
It's very mysterious. What pushed them to such acrobatic extremes to reach improbable heights to paint pictures that are only visible from afar?
It's often said that for much of rock art, there was a very strong motivation, because often it's found in places that are hard to access. But here, it takes incredible motivation. It couldn't have just happened. Someone wouldn't come along and think, hey, I'll knock off 2 or 3 paintings here. It takes long preparation, no doubt.
They probably risked their lives to do these things.
And why choose this spot specifically?
Finding paintings so high up a cliff face that seems so inaccessible comes as a shock. How were they executed? This is perhaps the first great mystery of Huashan art. Paul and Jean-Louis will try to solve it by questioning one of the leading experts, archaeologist Xin Chai-Luan, who has devoted a major part of his career to studying these paintings.
After analysis of all the paintings at the site, we assume that there may be various possibilities. First of all, for the lower parts, the painters could have worked from the terraces just above the river. The paintings higher up could have been done at the time of the floods, from boats or from bamboo scaffolding. The rest we can't explain, because it's impossible to come down on a rope from the summit of the mountain, and impossible to climb up from the base. Bamboo scaffolding is the only plausible explanation. Here in the south of China, there's lots of bamboo, so scaffolding techniques are very elaborate.
Xin Chai-Luan only retained 3 theories: climbing, ropes, and scaffolding. Climbing, why not? But how did the artist climber manage to carry with him the material and quantity of pigments needed to such a height? And how did he manage to paint such big figures while holding on to the rock face? Hanging from ropes from the top of the mountain? It's a fantasy on all levels. At Huashan, for example, the angle of the cliff face would leave the artist hanging much too far from the surface of the rock. The most realistic theory is that of scaffolding. It seems reasonable to use bamboo scaffolding, built up from the ground or down from the tops of the tall trees. But sometimes, even this theory doesn't totally dispel the mystery. And as plants like bamboo don't keep, there's no evidence to back it up. Whatever the case, what an insane challenge. What motivation could be sufficient to push someone into doing this? Some mystic ritual?
It makes you wonder if this was really part of the process of doing this art, was to show, look how clever I am, look how brave I am, look how crazy I am, maybe, to go that high. I can make a painting up there. Nobody else can go as high as that. So it may be a phenomenon of showing your prowess, showing your bravery, showing your sheer ability as an artist. You can go higher than anybody else. You can reach a place that would seem impossible to reach, and yet you can make a fine painting there.
The Huashan rock face itself, the images, the main panel, the characters are organized like a kind of human pyramid. It really looks like people making an attempt on the summit. So there's something that points towards climbing, and probably in a quest for immortality, rising to heaven.
Jean-Louis remembers the research he carried out in France. The link between these painted figures and these mountains reminded him of ancient texts of Chinese mythology and the illustrations that accompanied them.
The fact of using the mountain as a kind of elevator to immortality is something that is very present. We have prints that represent great sages that were turned into mountains. And one of the most famous represents Lao Tzu, who is considered the founder of Taoism, and therefore an immortal. So there are all these traditions that tell us that the great sages, when they felt the end was near, climbed a mountain and arrived at the summit. They spread their arms wide. And when they spread their arms, their garment, a large cape, is transformed into a dress of feathers, and they fly away and become immortal. So the image of Lao Tzu is that of an immortal, a great immortal sage.
Chinese mythology can give us a few clues to the popular imagination of the time. But to delve further, Paul and Jean-Louis need to pick up the investigation with the figures themselves. And one simple question: what do they represent? Scenes from daily life? Moments of real life? Or something else again?
Here, we're in front of a panel that's very typical in Huashan. In the center, there's this big figure on a dog that seems to be the main character on the panel. He's carrying a sword with a circular pommel and also a dagger in his right hand. He seems to have a small animal on his head. And he is standing atop another animal, enormous this time. It is clearly the central figure, the chief of the tribe. All around, the other characters have their hands raised. Many are crouching down or kneeling, as if venerating, or as part of a ceremonial dance. Unlike lots of instances of rock art, which evoke hunting or harvest scenes, Huashan paintings represent a ceremony, a sacred cult.
Thus, the main panel of Huashan transcribes a grand celebration, honoring warriors armed with swords and sitting atop animals, a mysterious cult embraced by an entire people. But which people? We must delve into the intricacies of Chinese history. Dating back close to 2,500 years, the Huashan paintings seem to have been carried out in a context that historians refer to as the Warring States period. Following countless wars against the small, independent mountain kingdoms, the Qin dynasty and then the Han dynasty managed to impose their dominance. In 221, Emperor Qi Shi Huangdi won a decisive victory that definitively brought the Huashan region under the wing of what would become the Han Empire. The Han civilization subsequently influenced local cultures, and the rock art tradition gradually died out. The various methods of dating have confirmed that the paintings were done before the Han conquest. Historians agree that they are the work of an indigenous people, the Luo Yue, who did indeed live in these mountains 2,500 years ago. Members of a minority called Zhuang are thought to be descendants of this people. Thanks to the Zhuang, the Luo Yue legends are still handed down today. And Jean-Louis is thrilled to hear Zuojiang Ping evoke one of these legends. It could shed light on the meaning of the ritual that has been carried out here for centuries.
The Zhuang worshipped dogs. According to legend, back when the Zhuang had no rice, a genie tried to help them get some rice to eat. So he sent the dog to steal rice from the god of thunder. As the dog was their friend, he agreed, but forgot to take a sack with him in which to put the rice. But as he was clever, he rolled around in the god's granary, and the rice stuck to his fur. Alas, the god of thunder caught him and punished him. But it was a dog with 9 tails, and the god cut off all save one. The dog returned to the world of the Zhuang with just a few grains of rice still stuck to the only tail that remained. The Zhuang planted them, and so originated the rice we eat today.
The legend of the dog who stole the rice provides a glimpse of one of the cults depicted at Huashan. It involves the dog and the god of thunder, and is a nod to the vital importance of rice growing. Do the painted scenes evoke an agrarian rather than warlike mythology? Divinities rather than combatants? But Zuojiang Ping indicates that the archaeological remains themselves offer essential information. For besides the human figures and the dogs, other types of figures are repeated on all the decorated panels. They evoke, for instance, bells or drums, instruments central to the grand celebration represented. Zuojiang Ping describes the stylized representations that could be those of drums, concentric circles or circles bearing a star or with a sun at their center. A large number of real drums made of bronze and dating back 2,500 years were discovered in the region. Their similarities with the circular motifs would seem to confirm the dating of the paintings and, of course, that they belong to a culture, that of the Luo Yue. Painted drums and real drums. Is this a new link from which to learn a little more about the great story of Huashan? The most complete collection of bronze drums from the province is to be found in the Nanning Museum of Popular Traditions. Paul and Jean-Louis are welcomed by one of the curators, Liu Wenyi, and Yang Yanyi, a researcher on his team.
The Liu Yue were responsible for 2 major creations, the Huashan paintings and the bronze drums. These 2 creations loomed large in their daily lives. At that time, both drums and paintings were linked to sacred cults. They are inseparable, and today they afford us a glimpse of their customs.
A new recurrent figure on the drums intrigues Paul and Jean-Louis.
But I notice on many of the drums here there is a very dominant motif, which is little statuettes of frogs, but we have not seen real depictions of frogs in the rock art. So is there a connection between the 2 in that respect?
I believe the frogs were deified, and the posture of characters on the Huashan paintings evoke a frog. The Luo Yue were a farming people. To them, the frog was a very important animal. Their croaking would herald the rain. The rain is capital to farmers. That's why the Luo Yue worshipped frogs. The Zhuang also have many fables that feature frogs. For example, the frog embodies the son of the god of thunder and croaks to ask for rain.
So we have the sun, we have the thunder, we have the frog. She is used to forecast the weather. So all this looks like a kind of mythology around agriculture. Is it correct?
In fact, the bronze drums are like books. They show us farming scenes, scenes from everyday life, all the importance of a farming people's relationship with the earth.
So why place the painting so high on the cliffs if it's related with agriculture?
I think the main reason was that the Luo Yue wanted to glorify these elements. It was directed to the gods, gods that the Luo Yue would call upon to obtain help and demonstrate their adoration.
These objects and their decoration, represented on the Huashan paintings, enable us to admire the art of the Luo Yue and seem to confirm the theory of farming ritual. Huashan art would thus seem to be at the crossroads between everyday and spiritual. Distant heirs to the Luo Yue kingdoms, today the Zhuang are a farming people. Would meeting the Zhuang minority be like meeting the creators of the bronze drums, and more especially the authors of these paintings? Of the great original story at Huashan? It's hard to shake that idea. Paul and Jean Louis visit a small village not far from Huashan, along with Gan Chao Cheng, singer and storyteller in the Zhuang language. He helps them to meet a Zhuang family. Though the meeting may be brief, Jean-Louis would like to find any traces of a continuity between the Zhuang today and their distant ancestors.
Yes, we are the singers of the village, and most importantly, they fall in love on a song fair.
So he sang to her, she sang to him.
Yeah, in traditional way.
叫他跟我唱歌这样。
First sing to her. He spotted her first.
啊，他跟我唱了，这样就得了，就联系上了。
And because she's also sort of fond of him, so they singing together and.
调书法的，那么唱调的对吧？哎，特生啦，快要嘛，不美人见我背呀。 mày đừng kinh tay giá cháu tao lệ bố mày lỡ dầu thật là vậy tôi sợ qua nó quá đấy.
Right away, what is striking is that Grace, the translator, doesn't understand Zhuang. Gan Chao Zheng must play the interpreter. He confirms that the villagers know all the legends and the ancient songs handed down in the Zhuang language. But it's impossible in such a short time to explore such a vast world. What is undeniable is that the Zhuang language identifies a people and its culture.
To me, the key connection that is still present and still evident is the language. Language is the main vector of the tradition, which is by definition oral, so that means the songs. We're dealing with people who evidently perpetuate the Zhuang tradition, or are part of the Zhuang tradition. It's hardly surprising that on such a quick visit, we haven't found the things we'd have loved to find, such as the magnificent story of the painting's origin. That would have been rather miraculous, you have to admit.
Trần ở canh danh mày thác lại mận lờ. Khiếp phiền ma thần chân chờ đây lơ. Ma lầu đi xây hữu chốt xa kèn lơ. Bằng ai về tầng nắm đi cái đây lại. Xảy chân canh canh mừng lâu trọng kèn lơ.
With each passing day, Paul and Jean-Louis feel that despite their hopes, Huashan will only yield fragments of its mystery. They have succeeded in lifting one corner of the veil, but it would take a long and thorough investigation to establish the multi-millennial link to the Luo Yue. They have, however, noted that everyone in the region is affected by the paintings. All are impressed by the posture of the painted characters. For some, it's the posture of the frog, the deified animal carved on the bronze drums. For others, it is a key action from a very ancient martial art called wushu. Agrarian cult or warrior cult? Paul and Jean-Louis are looking to find out more about the theory of a warlike origin thanks to Gan Min, chief of police of Ningming, Huashan's neighboring town. For the policeman is also, and above all, mayor of Wushu. The meeting took place in Ningming School after a demonstration on a Chinese scale.
So what's the connection between this and the rock art? Because we see he has this reproduction of the main panel in Huashan. So what are the connections between what we have seen now and the Huashan main panel?
Huashan Kan is a sport derived from wushu, which was created during the Zhou dynasty between 256 and 145 years BC. It was handed down from generation to generation and spread over the whole territory. It developed during the lives of our ancestors when they plowed the fields, hunted, and grew strong so as to resist attacks from other tribes. For more than 2,000 years, Huashan Kan was passed on through words and acts, from previous generations to the next generations. Our generation is also taking up the sport. At that time, there were no papers, so our ancestors passed on Huashan Wushu by painting on the rock.
They didn't just pass on wushu, but also other things.
Yes, of course.
Could he maybe give us lesson number one?
This is
First lesson.
Lesson one.
ancestors.
南，这是你，对，也对，这里也对，这里也对，对呀，也对，对，在这里，对呀，这里，这个，对，右手，对，这个是拿前头。
I admit I have some reservations about the contemporary reading of these images. For example, there are two main readings that people often quote. One makes an allusion to frogs because of the position of the characters with symmetrical arms and legs that might possibly evoke a frog. To others, it evokes wushu, which is a very ancient combat technique from this region, different from other regions' wushu, etc. Okay, maybe, but it's based on virtually nothing, just this position. It just fits into a current reality where people feel a need to give meaning to these images. That's very important, as not all the places in the world where there is rock art do local people, firstly, take an interest, and secondly, also try to impart meaning and consider that meaning very important, essential even, to their own identity.
Paul and Jean-Louis gradually understand that in current Chinese society, various accounts inspired by the paintings coexist. Agrarian rites or warlike mythologies, It matters not if these interpretations are incompatible. The authorities don't hesitate to merge them together into one big official story, which is even more useful as the site is now a candidate for the UNESCO World Heritage List.
Everywhere, in hotels, on bath towels, street lamps, roadside billboards, we see images borrowed from Huashan iconography.
There's a momentum underway. It involves a program of major refurbishment and site development. Everything is being rescaled for mass access by tourists, as well as to keep the work safe, with, for example, permanent surveillance by CCTV and the launch of records programs that use the latest technologies. Paul and Jean-Louis also witness a data collection operation on the Huashan cliff face with the help of a strange process.
So could you explain us what are you about to do here? What is this machine?
This is a laser 3D scanner. This technique enables you to take a three-dimensional 360-degree record.
What's the relation between this machine and the drone? Are they working together?
The 3D scanner just gives us the relief, and the drone captures visual information. We thus build up a relief panoramic vision. In fact, we combine the data from two different machines. The two tools don't work together, but they round each other out for the final rendering.
The laser beam allows us to map with millimeter precision the relief of the painted face. At the same time, this same face is filmed in high resolution by a drone. The images and the scanned relief are then united by a computer application in order to reconstruct a 3D record with unprecedented precision. Paul and Jean-Louis observed the result on the computer of the young engineer in charge of the program and under the curious gaze of Qinchai Luan. Around 10 years ago, he carried out an exhaustive survey of rock art paintings in the region, but using a quite different technique, one based on watercolors, more artistic than digital.
At the time of the first survey, an illustrator colleague copied the paintings from a distance using a zoom lens. I was standing by to help with another telescope. We compared it as best we could with the original, but the dimensions could only be an estimation.
To the surprise of many, the comparison reveals far more than a difference in method. It allows us to discover the evolution of Huashan's main panel, or its degradation to be exact. Jean-Louis asks if it's possible to compare a small figure he liked on the two surveys, that of the boat.
This is it. Yes, this is it. This is interesting to compare with the old tracing.
This part has disappeared from erosion by the wind and rain.
The new technology is just fantastic in producing more information, more accurate information, and also helping you to see the deterioration that has happened to some of these panels just in the last 30 years.
Jean-Louis is already imagining how D-Stretch, the colorimetric analysis software he's using, could complement these new scanner techniques. By playing with the color of the photographs, D-Stretch reveals motifs that overlays or alterations have rendered almost invisible. A computer process that augments the range of new tools available to the researchers. Qinchai Luan then offers to guide Paul and Jean-Louis to a very beautiful panel far from the river, one now unfortunately almost completely erased. maybe Jean-Louis's process will enable them to rediscover the panel.
Okay.
The damp mists soak the heights of the Fusui County. The drizzle turns to rain when the little group that has formed around Paul and Jean-Louis attempts to clear a path through to the site of Balai. Qinchai Luan's panel is no more than 100 meters away, but the forest stands as a last line of defense.
Thank you.
Obviously, a lot of detail has been lost, but it's pretty monumental in size. It must have been made to be seen from far away, and we can guess that they reached that level.
By standing on that little ledge there.
Yeah, but even from there, they couldn't have reached.
They couldn't have done the bird. In fact, it isn't very visible, especially because the rock is very deformed, and there are a lot of cupules, so it affects visibility. But here I think with a D-stretch, we could get a very good result, and we'll make it all visible.
As expected, the main panel reveals more than can actually be seen. One of the most eloquent testimonies to Huashan art is fast disappearing. But Qinchai Luan's intuition was right. What Paul and Jean-Louis believe they spotted will be revived by the photos thanks to D-stretch, even revealing details invisible to the naked eye. The group discovers other paintings by descending to a natural rock shelter. The key figures of Huashan art are all present. Characters with typical posture and drawing style, drums and dogs, still the same images, even several kilometers from the river.
What I really like in this example is that not only are we sheltered from the rain, but we can really get close, very close to the figures, much more so than at Huashan. They came up to this level, so we can really see the size and the technique of these paintings.
It's the first time we've been at the same height as the paintings.
On top of that, it's an example of rock art that is still used in current belief systems. We can see the offerings and the candles and so on, and so it continues to play a role in the world today.
So this way of worshipping the painting, is it something new? Or can we consider that since the beginning the paintings were worshipped in some way, not exactly in the same way, but we don't know how, but can we imagine that?
There are lots of different rituals. To us, the paintings reflect a ceremony. They're like a camera that records the moments of a ceremony. The offerings to the gods and the ancestors, the dances, etc.
The conversation over, Qinchai Luan goes off to one side and begins a ritual that Paul and Jean-Louis don't expect at all from a scientist. In the Huashan region, Paul and Jean-Louis witnessed the use of an ancient art as a source of new beliefs. Though the original meaning is to a great extent lost, the sanctity of the paintings persists through the ages. Today, the Zhuang minority sees in these paintings the illustration of a founding myth, even adopting it as an identifying symbol. one that the authorities eagerly promote as long as its cultural value serves Chinese grandeur. And as every myth needs a hero, here are two. Huashan is celebrating the return of the Zhu brothers. Native to the region, the Zhu brothers are painters and artists, now settled in Chicago and world-renowned. They are welcomed like rock stars because even the origin of their work is closely linked to the art of Huashan. In 2011, Barack Obama commissioned them to do a painting to be presented to the Chinese president on an official visit to the United States. Today, the Zhu brothers are famous media darlings. They willingly lend themselves to the game of Chinese cultural affirmation.
I think it's like this thing, we believe this thing is an ancient rock painting is created by the Zhuang minority. And then that's why they're very...
You feel maybe from your blood, you feel connected.
Maybe this painting, this kind of painting will provide some kind of spirit. Like, what is the spirit for the contemporary art? What's the spirit for, like, the painting, the new language? And then you can, you're always looking for. And this thing, we feel is something very basic there. Because for contemporary art, it's something, you need something very strong, but very silent, but very powerful and basic.
That day, Paul and Jean-Louis are not in Huashan to meet the Zhu brothers, but they know their work and decide to round off their trip by visiting the Nanning Museum of Contemporary Art. There they find their large works and look for links with Huashan art.
There's different things in each section, but the only real inspiration I can see from the Huashan rock art are these two human figures here and possibly a drum underneath. But clearly this is not the main focus of this painting, it seems to be an incidental inspiration.
I find it interesting that on this painting, the closest elements to those of the original Huashan paintings is at the center. And at the same time, that's the least visible part. And what emerges from afar is their current art, which is inspired by these images, but which has distanced itself considerably.
The feeling is liberty, because everything is by feeling. And those guys, when they're in, I don't know, like how many thousand years ago, when they paint those paintings, number one, they will not have a drawing. They don't have a drawing, they don't have a measurement, and maybe they have a very basic color.
And then they don't think the people either like it or not. Yeah, they just feel this to create something really powerful and like holy. I think kind of the little bit relate to the ancient religion.
Just like a great master. They're very confident about what they do. Yeah.
The fact that the Zhu brothers have somehow appropriated Huashan art is to me all part of the same process or the same phenomenon. As the people who interpret the Huashan anthropomorph, as the ancestor of the Wushu martial art, it's part of the same dynamic as people reinterpreting the images as gods or as spirits before which even now we offer prayers. What seems important to me is that in the end this art is still alive in one way or another, and that totally different people each give it a particular meaning, which in a way allows it to keep living.
For Paul and Jean-Louis, this first exploration has allowed them to gather certain clues from which to elucidate the meaning of the spectacular images of Huashan, but only clues. Patient research is required, particularly to the Zhuang people, to obtain anything more. After the trip, the most unexpected part will doubtless be seeing the key role played by this ancient art in contemporary society. Each era, each human community feels the need to recreate its own story from those lost in the meanders of a too distant past. A process upon which the researchers' hard work will shed light. The fact that Huashan art has become the rallying point for a whole community means that its fascination still works. The mystery of its beautiful, crazy gesture remains, and it inspires us. It passes on some of its boldness. Even in a society like Chinese society, where evolution may sometimes appear like a forced march, an ancient art like that of Huashan will survive the vagaries of history and will never be forgotten.